everyone. We're going to give folks just a couple of minutes to join the meeting, and then we'll get started very shortly. Very shortly. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Marcus Thornton. I am the Deputy CDO for the Commonwealth of Virginia and the Office of Data Governance and Analytics. And welcome to our quarterly TAC Subcommittee meeting again. We welcome you guys again. As you can see, we've got a very packed agenda. And so a lot of material to get through, some items of business to work through. As you can see, we're going to work through and adopt the agenda. There will be a subcommittee, pretty extensive subcommittee overview. We'll go through some of the old and new business, and then we'll open it up for any public comments. As always, this meeting is meant to be collaborative. So please, at any point in time, if there's a question or something, raise your hand through the chat. Myself, Carolyn Wheeler will acknowledge you, and I'm sure we can get your questions answered somehow. Okay, so having said that, I'm going to hand this over so we can start our roll call.
Okay, I'm going to go through it pretty quickly. Marcus, I know you're here. Kellen Singleton, registered but not yet joined. Jack Kolakowski, I believe you're here. Say hi. Okay. Andrew, and I'm sorry, Andrew, what's the correct way to say your last name?
It's Franzition, like transition with an S.
I never would have gotten that.
But I'm here.
Thank you very much. Ben McFarland, Whitney Catchmark.
I'm here.
Okay,
Ben's here.
Good morning, sir. Brianna Heath, I believe you're here.
I am here.
Eli, I believe you're here.
Yes.
Chris Swanson, I believe you're here.
Here.
And Chris Berg, you're here.
Here.
I don't believe we have anybody from the VMRC, Jamie, Rachel, or Randy. And Scott Whitehurst, I believe you're here.
I'm here.
Ian Blair.
Present.
And Thomas Rupert.
Here.
Were there any members present that I didn't call? All right, we have the roll call.
All right, excellent. Just a couple of items of business here then. We're going to if we could have someone make a motion, please, to adopt the agenda that you see here, and we'll make a quick vote on that.
I motion.
Okay, thank you. Motion to adopt the agenda.
Second.
Thank you. We also have a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, so the agenda that we see before us is adopted. Thank you. And then very quickly, we have one other second order of business for the adoption of the Q1 2024 meeting minutes. Should have been previously sent out to all of you all. Hope you had a chance to review that. Would someone make a motion to adopt the Q1 2024 meeting minutes?
Motion to adopt Q1 2024 meeting minutes.
Thank you. Motion to adopt. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor to adopt the Q1 2024 meeting minutes, say aye.
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 Are any opposed? Nay? Okay. Then the Q1 2024 meeting minutes is adopted. Thank you all very much for going through that order of business. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Carolyn, who will go through our overview.
Wonderful. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see you all today. So I'm going to jump into some quick reminders about the Coastal Resilience Master Plan, what we're doing with this plan, some overviews of what's going on with the subcommittee and where we're at in this process. And then from there, kind of jump into some updates on where we're at with the impact assessment and the plan of resilience actions analysis. So the Coastal Resilience Master Plan, as I think you all know, is outlined in code, and all of these kind of bullets on the left are kind of descriptions in code of what it needs to be. In kind of practice, what we're developing here is a flood hazard exposure model and impact assessment forward-looking for the coastal region, which is those 8 coastal planning district commissions. In addition, we're developing an inventory of planned resilience actions. So that's those projects and initiatives that we're collecting in the Coastal Resilience Web Explorer, developing that summary as well as analyzing, gaps, opportunities, trends that exist within those projects and initiatives. Also looking at financial needs for flood resilience, and then importantly, developing subcommittee recommendations with you all. And then, of course, this plan needs to be developed and released by the end of this year, and then updated every 5 years thereafter. This subcommittee has been working on supporting DCR with informing the development of the flood hazard impact assessment, as well as informing the identification and analysis of those planned resilience actions. In addition, we've talked previously and are going to start working today on developing those subcommittee recommendations. Here's our schedule. We are talking a little bit about the planned resilience actions today. We're going to have Stantec do a presentation on that, and then starting our recommendations, brainstorming. We'll continue with the recommendations for the next 2 meetings, and we'll talk more about that process in the slides to come. So big updates to share. I know we've been talking for many meetings about getting consultants on board to help us with this work, so we're excited to finally have those additional consulting teams on board. So we've got Stantec and Launch, many members of those teams here today to help us with these elements of the plan development that you see on the screen here. Of course, that's in addition to Dewberry, who is already on board and supporting us with the key elements, including the hazard data and impact assessment, as well as that Web Explorer update and mock-up. In addition to the Stantec, Launch, and Dewberry teams, we are also working with AECOM, who is developing a public outreach campaign for this plan. That includes those underserved community meetings, which are part of the outreach and engagement strategy for the plan, as well as other elements of making the public aware of what we're doing with the plan and opportunities to provide comment. They're also going to be developing the public outreach campaign for the Virginia Flood Protection Master Plan due out at the end of next year. I'm not going to have the whole Launch team introduce themselves and the Stantec team today. You'll kind of meet them throughout the course of the discussion, but suffice it to say there's many of them on the call today, so you'll start interacting with them at this meeting, and they'll be around for the next meetings as well. Okay, are there any questions on those updates and kind of refreshers before I jump into the old business updates? Okay, great. All right, so for our impact assessment process, so as I'm sure you all remember, we've been talking about the impact assessment for several meetings now. The overall process of where we're at with developing it for the final plan. Dewberry has already kind of compiled that base asset database, which serves as all those key assets that we care about, that we're looking at how flooding is going to impact them today and over the decades to come. They've also developed that methodology. So you all had a chance to review. I distributed via email the final draft methodology for feedback, and I got some comments on that. So thank you to everybody who took the time to review and give us comments on both that and the asset data. We did review all of those comments and find opportunities to incorporate them where we could into methodology. If you all go into the agenda for this meeting, there's a link, and also in an email from me, there's a link to the meeting materials for this meeting. If you scroll to the end of that, the draft final methodology that Dewberry is working with and implementing right now is there. So if you're interested in seeing that kind of final working version, you can see it there. It also includes that kind of high-level list of what asset data we're using for this. Stantec is already on board and starting to work on data review and story development. They'll continue working on that through September to produce the final summary of the data and really pulling out the most important findings, developing graphs, charts, narratives to include in the plan itself. So that will be ongoing through the remainder of the year. On the planned resilience action side, so we've been working together with you all and with various stakeholders to collect information on projects and initiatives already happening in the coastal region since really the Phase 1 plan. As you all remember, we've released the user portal that allows people to go in and update information on their projects and initiatives anytime. We also hosted another kind of bulk upload and call for projects from the PDCs. And at this point, we're working with TAC to produce kind of initial review summary of the data, identify opportunities where we might need to fill gaps or improve the data, and then provide data entry support and improve the quality of that data. So all of that's going on through July. And Christina from the TAC team is going to give an update on where they're currently at with some of that work in just a couple of minutes. So once we've got the data in place and we feel like we're in best possible shape that we can be based on our schedule and the information we're gathering from our stakeholders, we'll start that analysis process and produce a plan summary to appear in that final plan, as well as in the Coastal Resilience Web Explorer. Just in terms of what that summary is going to look like, here's a quick outline of what we've been discussing. This should look fairly familiar. I presented it last time and we talked about it a little bit. When we go into actually kind of analyze and summarize those projects and initiatives in the plan, it will include kind of that just summary of what's in the inventory, looking at things like the number of projects across different localities, watersheds, planning district commissions, as well as common themes. And then in addition to that summary, also a gaps and opportunities analysis. So that can include things like areas with no planned projects or initiatives that are showing up as being high flood risk, as well as potential opportunities for coordination, either based on the geographic proximity of a project or initiative or, similar initiative types. So maybe two localities are developing resilient design standards and there's an opportunity for collaboration there. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Christina, who's going to walk us through some updates on their Planned Resilience Actions development.
Thanks, Carolyn. As you all mentioned, I'm Christina with TAC. I'm going to take you through just a few slides, about 10 minutes here. And then we do have a little time at the end for questions. So definitely keep those in mind as I go through the slides and feel free to ask those towards the end. We can go to the next slide. I won't spend too much time here because I think it summarizes what Carolyn just mentioned, but we are in our Planned Resilience Actions analysis phase. So that really started with us kind of taking an initial review of the Coastal Resilience Web Explorer, and then kind of understanding trends as well as gaps and potential opportunities within the project inventory available through the Web Explorer. And I will summarize some of those trends today. So we kind of just started with like the broad view. I'm going to kind of start at the top and then we'll kind of funnel down and narrow down into some of the actual project information as I go through. But in total, there are 681 total projects within the inventory on the Web Explorer. 516 of those were submitted during phase 1. And then since phase 1, there's been an additional 165 approved projects or initiatives. And then this pie chart here just kind of shows the breakdown of our project and initiative types. So we kind of have two different, we've got our capacity initiatives, and then we also have our projects. So about 1/3 or 31% were of submitted actions were capacity initiatives. The other 69% were designated as projects. And you can see here we've got them kind of broken down into the project type. So there's structural projects, natural and nature-based projects, hybrid projects, and that's where, and I'll break this down a little more on the next slide, but where there's kind of a nature-based and the structural component to the project. And then we also had about 3% of our projects that were designated as other. Some examples of those are things like septic repair programs or like high water mark programs, things like that. So it's kind of a little bit of a catch-all for ones that maybe didn't fit quite as nicely into these other buckets. Next slide. So looking specifically at those project pieces, so not the capacity initiatives, those are also broken down into subtypes, right? So users can go in and they can select some subtypes associated with their projects. You can see this definitely adds up to more than like 680. So users they can select more than one. So often there's several different components to these, but we've got them kind of color coded here if they're structural, nature-based solution, or if they were designated as hybrid. You can kind of tell here the vast majority of projects that were input, and then the subtype selected was a drainage improvement. So we've got like 333 projects, and then our next kind of highest tiers are that other category in our green infrastructure, kind of in the 80s. So definitely like a trend there we noticed where definitely sort of skewed towards those drainage improvements. Next slide. And then within looking at specifically at the projects versus the capacity initiatives, users are also asked to consider the hazard addressed through their project. And they can select more than one. So about a third of projects did address more than one identified coastal hazard, and then about 2/3 did only address one. And again, you can see here, by far most projects address stormwater flooding, and that tracks well with the previous slide, right? If we're having our drainage improvements, it makes sense that they're simply addressing stormwater flooding. But then some other coastal hazards that are addressed through projects include things like storm surge flooding, tidal flooding. Then we get a little bit of a drop when we get down to things like riverine, and shoreline erosion and groundwater especially. Okay. So then kind of on the flip side, looking at that capacity piece, those were designated more as a purpose and need. So understanding again what kind of needs those might be fulfilling within the community. Again, they can select multiple, so most do serve multiple purposes and needs, so over 80%. And then some of the kind of like, I guess, highest scores you could say on those purpose and needs included community resilience, planning capacity, and adaptation options. So those all had over 100 initiatives selected. But then there are also things like risk awareness, economic resilience, ecosystem resilience, and our funding capacity needs. So we also looked at trends in the cost information that's inputted by users by project subtype. So we've got our capacity initiatives, and then we've got those 4 different kind of types of projects here. And these are just some box and whisker plots to kind of show, again, where you've got like a median price point for the project type as well as the different quartiles here. And just some trends to point out that we kind of thought were interesting is that the hybrid project types tended to be a bit more expensive and have higher costs associated with them. That wasn't completely surprising, just again thinking that like right, they've got those 2 components, they've got both the structural and the nature-based components to them. So it made sense in a lot of ways. And we did remove, there were some outliers from this data, primarily within that hybrid category. So we removed some that were kind of on the, hundreds of millions of dollars scale, just to kind of, again, just make sure the data wasn't very skewed in how we're presenting it, but we can share that information as well. And then another trend that was kind of interesting is that the structural projects and the nature-based solutions are kind of similar in their both median cost and their quartiles as well. Not an exact match, but I think sometimes it's challenging to make the case for those nature-based solutions. And so I think this showing that there's not maybe just kind of huge difference in the anticipated cost is an interesting trend to point out. And then kind of as expected, those capacity initiative costs were projected to be much lower relative to our projects. And again, those tend to include things more like our planning, whether it's project planning phase or potentially like just actually resilience plans, things like that. So again, just a slightly lower cost associated with those when you think about like construction costs associated with projects. Next slide. So then we also kind of took a look at the data geographically and tried to understand how the project inventory was sort of broken up across different types of geographies. So we started by looking at distribution by locality, so again, independent cities and counties, and how they had just different numbers of projects and initiatives together. And just some kind of trends there where the highest concentration, not by far, I would say, would be in the Hampton Roads, Eastern Shore area, especially with the city of Hampton having the highest number of projects and initiatives with just under 200, whereas our next locality had 92 projects. So we have about 100 projects more. And we do believe some of that is maybe putting in all projects from their resilience, their flood resilience plan. Then we also looked at the distribution of projects and initiatives by watershed. And so you can see here, there's a large concentration of projects and initiatives around the Chesapeake Bay and the Eastern Shore areas. And I think, again, that kind of makes sense or makes sense to us with some of the initiatives and those kind of a long history of some of the kind of resilience and planning that's been in that area. And then we also noted that there's quite a few projects kind of in, like, once you get a little further west towards like the Richmond, Fredericksburg areas, and then a lower number of projects kind of in between those two areas. So again, maybe areas that are a little more rural. So just something that we wanted to potentially dive in a little bit more into and to understand what types of projects are there. And we can address that through our next piece, which is that technical assistance and data quality improvement, so we can do a little bit more kind of ground truthing with those communities. And then just kind of one last interesting trend with the watersheds is it's, you know, not an exact match, but in some areas we noted that there's the number of projects sort of mirror the PDC boundaries, so we think that might just be kind of how projects are being input into the Web Explorer, and also just maybe having some like kind of PDC-wide initiatives. So you can see kind of in the Washington Regional Commission and the Plan RVA area, they kind of mirror the PDC boundary pretty closely. So then one other kind of area we looked at, and this is kind of a little text heavy, so I apologize for that, but we did look at what we consider like high flood risk areas. And then we wanted to understand where those areas were relative to the same areas where there were maybe either low project and initiative counts or even just like an absence of projects or initiatives altogether. So we looked at projects and initiatives that were less than 270,000 acres. That was kind of done in our JS analysis through kind of like a natural breaks process. We didn't want to, again, capture these like PDC-wide projects. It's like a little too large to really understand when we were trying to compare it relative to the coastal flood data that's on the Web Explorer. And then as far as considerations for high flood risk, we selected the year 2080, and then we selected the 10% or greater annual exceedance flood as kind of an indicator of where maybe somewhere was considered particularly high risk. And so some just kind of general trends that we noted is that high flood risk areas along rivers, so like the James River, York, Rappahannock, Potomac, kind of tended to have less projects, even though they did have these high risk areas. And we kind of think maybe some of the focus during phase one more on the coastal hazards versus the riverine hazards could have prompted this. And again, that's something that we're looking into with our technical assistance and our data quality improvement that will be hopefully addressed through phase two. And then just a few areas of note that maybe didn't have quite as many projects as maybe we were expecting relative to the flood risk. Portsmouth had a low number of projects relative to Norfolk, even though they're neighboring and they have pretty similar flood risks. Downtown West Point had no projects identified, but does have flood-prone areas, especially just given its kind of location within kind of like where the river splits into like two smaller rivers. Gloucester had no projects identified, and Gloucester Point only had one project identified, but again, both are in those high flood risk areas. And then similarly, Pocosin also had no projects identified. Fine. So then just to kind of wrap up, and I've got a next step slide as well, but from here, after kind of analyzing those initial trends in the data and understanding what we have in our project inventory, we kind of have opportunities for both data improvement and then also additional analysis to understand like where we might need to reach out to communities and do that technical assistance piece to understand how we can kind of best leverage the data that we do have. So under data improvement, we want to address missing cost data. kind of realized that about a little over 20% of project owners have missing cost data. So we want to work with those project owners to address those gaps. We also are looking to identify and remove duplicate projects. So those would be projects that have been maybe just put into the Web Explorer multiple times. So we're looking at more of like a kind of like a one-to-one match on those. We've identified just a few. And then we're also looking to improve our spatial data quality. So like one example might be making sure that projects are put in and that the spatial boundary drawn for those projects are sort of right sized. So kind of an example might be if we have a project that is maybe upsizing a drainage culvert, but the project location scale that was drawn is at the county-wide level, right? We want to work with project owners to make sure we're right sizing that and really honing in on the actual area that the project will take place in. And then some opportunities identified so far for additional analysis include considerations of social vulnerability. So again, kind of like we've looked at for the high flood risk areas, where are there areas where, especially where there might be high flood risk and high social vulnerability, but maybe we've got a low number of projects and initiatives, and how can we work with those communities to identify projects or get project input into the viewer if they already have projects identified that maybe just haven't been put into the Web Explorer. We also, and Caroline mentioned this, I won't go into too much detail, but there's potential opportunities for project coordination where maybe there is like a geographic opportunity to coordinate, right? We've got two neighboring communities. If one has a project and it, maybe ends at the boundary, but the risk doesn't stop, how can we kind of have both communities coordinating to leverage that or leverage a similar effort? And then we also want to look at maybe if there's a similar, like similar projects that are identifying different types or similar types of problems, but the project itself is different. How can we kind of help project owners understand best practices and kind of lead to good potential outcomes? And then lastly, we want to look at the scale of benefits. So this is one piece that users can put into the Web Explorer. And it's usually based on like the geographic scale of benefits. So is it a watershed-wide benefit? Is a smaller area that's benefiting? So we want to begin with a spot check for those and just kind of see if it feels accurate, and then also maybe work with project owners to kind of again get those resized. And so again, from there, kind of what's next. I know Caroline already had our kind of slide at the beginning that sort of shows the progress that we'll make as we move through. But now that we've done our initial inventory review, we are working to address, again, we've gotten some comments from DCR on the trends we've noticed so far. I know we'll get feedback from folks today. We have drafted and we're working to finalize a data quality improvement plan with DCR. So we'll have a plan in place to help improve the quality of the data for the projects that have been put into the viewer so far. And then we'll also conduct technical assistance and data improvement. So again, we'll be working directly with project owners to help kind of fill in those gaps that we've noticed and then leverage additional data sources to be able to kind of flesh out projects and make sure, again, they're the highest quality that they can be. And then we'll also carry out those additional analysis pieces under the planning, the plan resilience actions task, and then we'll also, from there, we'll have our summary report where kind of all of the trends and all of the technical assistance and data improvements that we've done will be summarized in the phase 2 plan.
Great, thank you, Christina.
Yeah. And then Linda, Caroline, if we have time for folks to ask questions, we can do that now. I don't know if you want to do them towards the end.
Yeah, does anybody have any questions or comments regarding what Christina presented? Thomas?
Yes, when considering kind of the pie chart on the total number, well, two questions. First, on the pie chart about the projects and initiatives since phase 1. Do we have any feel for how accurate this is to quote-unquote reality or all the possible suite of projects that are out there? Do we have any idea if how many may or may not be getting reported?
We have some initial known areas of gaps. So there's, we need to work with certain PDCs, and we know we need to work with certain PDCs to get their updated inventory in there. One example of that is the Middle Peninsula. We have known that they have input kind of two things, one initiative and one project for Fight the Flood. In reality, that program is a lot of different projects and initiatives across. And so we're working on getting the point data for those into it, so it's not just kind of a single project necessarily being reflected. Maybe it's one initiative and many projects. So that's an example. But part of what Christina, the STANZAC team, and Christina are working on is helping to identify additional gaps. And part of that we're trying to address through our upcoming engagement. We have some locality meetings coming up with Crater PDC, HR PDC, Peninsula and kind of Western Tidewater, and then Plan RVA to just get a check in those areas. Do they have anything that we are not including that they would like us to include? So we're hoping before the end of June, those meetings will occur, and we're hoping to get some more feedback from those as well.
Great, thank you. That helps me understand a little bit where it's at. And the other quick question I had is on the costs by project subtype. I guess I'm not certain how much I understand this is value, because if the cost of a project is not related in any way, shape, or form to, say, size, impact, number of people impacted, amount of value of protection, it's kind of hard to say, why are we comparing costs of, say, a several thousand foot, say, living shoreline versus, say, adding a couple of backup preventers on smaller stormwater pipes. It's just hard to know how to compare these and what the costs mean.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and something that we also want to look at. And again, these were just kind of like overall trends across all projects, just given like our timing today. But I do think it's worth, as we kind of look in and we look to like improve data quality, we do want to understand like if the cost feels appropriate as well. So as we work with, again, our localities and work to build out their projects, whether it's projects that are currently missing from the Web Explorer or projects that have already been put in, like the ones that are the cost data is provided today, if it, making sure that the cost data is appropriate as it's been put in is something we can also consider.
Yeah. I agree with your comment, Thomas. I think we can include it in the plan, the analysis. If we include something like this, it needs to be compared across either scale or scale of benefits, as you pointed out. Any other comments from subcommittee members? Okay. Well, feel free to follow up if you have something occur to you after this meeting. We would welcome your feedback via email in the next couple of days. As Christina mentioned, STANZAC is working on finalizing their data quality improvement plan to really get going on that technical assistance and helping get the data quality improvement in place. So, if you have other things that occur to you, please don't hesitate to reach out. All right, I'm going to move us into new business and recommendations development, which is the star of today's show. So if you are, not fully in this meeting right now, get prepared to participate, because this is going to be interactive and engaging. So as you all know, we've been talking about subcommittee recommendations for the last several meetings, the fact that we're going to be developing them. I wanted to set the stage a little bit about what the purpose of these recommendations is and how they're going to be used before we get into actually brainstorming. So these subcommittee recommendations should focus on opportunities to improve the mitigation of severe and repetitive flooding in the coastal region, including actions which can be implemented between 2024 and the next planning cycle, so over the next 1 to 4 years, as well as any recommendations that you all have about ways that we can do the planning process better the next time around. So when we come back 5 years from now, we have another plan update, what sort of process improvements would you want to see? The implementers, the implementing audience for these recommendations can be a variety of actors. So it doesn't just need to be DCR. It could be state government as a whole, the General Assembly, planning district commissions, local governments, or others. But we do want, just given kind of the amount of time that we have to come to consensus about these and potentially the lack of stakeholder involvement, we have to say, yes, I agree. We want to keep those relatively general at this point. So the recommendation should be, state agencies rather than calling out VDEM or someone like that in particular. We're looking to develop about 3 to 5 recommendations per subcommittee. And then those recommendations are going to be presented as a section of the final plan document as recommendations of this public body. So recommendations of the Coastal Resilience Technical Advisory Committee. In terms of process, so Launch is going to facilitate us through these discussions today and over the next few meetings. You can see here the schedule for what we're looking at. Today, we're going to start brainstorming. We're going to set you all up to do some prioritization after the meeting. And then when we come back together for our Q3 subcommittee meeting, we'll review and revise where we're at with those draft recommendations. Our final meeting will be finalizing and voting on the recommendations so that we can take those to our final full TAC meeting before the plan is released to vote on all of the subcommittee recommendations. Along the way, we will also be reporting out status updates so that the full TAC isn't seeing this for the first time at their Q4 meeting. We want these recommendations to be informed by your prior discussions, the phase 1 plan, stakeholder engagement, and any sort of surveys we may conduct between the meetings. So we recognize that there's already been some discussion to help inform these recommendations and have started putting together some draft themes that we can use to help guide this discussion based on what we've heard from you all already. Just in terms of that background material, things that you might find useful as we go through the exercise today to reference. I did put these in the background materials and information, and also there's the objectives are in the slides from today. But if you click through that PDF that I shared in the agenda, there's a link to the meeting materials, which includes the phase 1 TAC recommendations, particularly those that are most relevant to the purpose of this subcommittee. And then also the results of that end user survey. So if you all remember, we conducted a survey of our intended end users and asked a lot of questions which you might find relevant to help guide our discussion today. So check out that PDF if it's helpful. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Linda. She is going to take us through the exercise and the activity.
Thanks, Carolyn. Welcome, everybody. So I'm Linda Warren from Launch Consulting, and today, what we're going to do is dive in and come up with different recommendations that you think are very important. So any of the recommendations that you have seen already, if they're written in one of the other documents like Carolyn sent, it's up to you to bring them forward, make them come alive, and move them towards the next step. So we'll want you to write those in today. So our activities for about the next hour, we're going to be refining the themes that we've come up with and see if those fit for you. That's what we'll do first. When we do that, I ask that all the members turn your cameras on, if at all possible. Then what we're going to do, after we do some individual brainstorming in the breakout rooms, you'll be able to discuss those recommendations, come up with other ones, and that will be happening in the breakout rooms themselves. So if you've never been in a breakout room in Zoom before, it's really fun. It's like going into hyperspace for a second and then you land. And we'll talk a little bit about the details, the technical details of how to do that in a little bit. After the breakout rooms, you'll be coming back into the main room, and then we'll be discussing what you came up with as a group. We will conclude our conversation by 11:40 today, and then at 11:40, there's time for public comment. After the meeting, sometime in the next couple weeks, you will see a survey come out. That survey will probably take you about 90 seconds to fill out, so we're going to ask you to take those 90 seconds to do it a few weeks after this meeting, and be able to list what your probably top 10 recommendations would be personally, based on the ones that you saw. So that's our agenda for the next hour. And what we can do now is dive in to what some of those themes will be. So the recommendation topic for this subcommittee should primarily focus on things like assessing the impacts of flooding, inventorying and analyzing any existing flood resilience actions, and establishing criteria to define where the greatest need for flood resilience action exists. So these are the general concepts around the recommendations that you'll focus on. There are 4 subcommittees, so each of those subcommittees will have a different focus on recommendations. And here's the point where we're going to have a group discussion now. So please, if you can, turn your cameras on. You can unmute yourselves, and I will call on you a little bit to be able to make sure that your opinions are voiced. So if you think about recommendation topics, so not the details of them, but if we were to summarize any of the recommendations that you could come up with as a subcommittee, are these themes good themes for you? Because we can change them now before we go into discussion. So the first theme, driving toward outcomes. The second theme, supplying actionable impact data. And then the third theme, identifying flood resilience needs. So when you see this, we certainly could have other themes too. Does any one of the members want to give comments? Does this sound like a good set of theme topics? Would you have changes in wording? Any other ideas? Anyone want to go first? And you can just unmute yourself and give us your opinion.
Yeah, I'll go first. This is Chris Swanson at VDOT. I like the 3 themes that are presented. I don't know if there is an order of the themes or if they're all sort of equitable in terms of the way we're viewing them, but I sort of see supplying actionable data and identifying needs as the lead up to driving towards outcomes. So if there's there is a hierarchy, I would sort of look at it that way.
Great. And these themes, so that's a great point, Chris, because they do lead from one to the other. Sometimes some may even cross over in different categories. So they are, I guess I would like to say that they are there just to give you an idea of where to start and how to organize those recommendations. So you can decide as a group later, the hierarchy will come when you're voting on which recommendations are most important. Great. And everyone will have a chance to speak, and I'm asking everyone right now just to speak, so that we've got 13 members with us today, which is fabulous. We want to hear just a few seconds from all of you. Do these categories work? Andrew, what do you think?
I think you're muted if you're talking.
I'm trying to think.
Okay, sorry.
I'm unmuted. I'm just coming up with what to say. I guess the biggest thing I look towards is how we drive towards the outcomes or how we do implementation.
Okay.
But that's pretty much just the general idea. I don't have a whole lot to say, to tell you the truth.
Okay. Well, that's good. If these themes work for now, that's what we want to know. Because when we go into our breakout rooms, the breakout rooms, we'll have 3 breakout rooms. And so each one of those breakout rooms will cover a different theme. And you will have a chance to go to all of those themes. So if these categories are good, that's what we should be good with.
I have one quick, it's not so much necessarily a suggestion for what to add, but a question maybe. I know when looking at some of our subcommittee recommendations under project evaluation, one of the points that really stood out to me is that the scoring of projects tends to place a premium on those that address current flooding issues. and that this is not necessarily a strategic use of funds in building long-term resilience. So within this, I'm wondering, do we want to have take any account of kind of temporal aspects when we're looking at recommendations and projects?
Great question.
I think maybe, Linda, as you go through the next slides, it might be helpful to keep that comment and question in mind so that we can kind of decide from there if it's sufficiently incorporated or if into one of these existing themes or if it should be an additional theme. That would be my recommendation.
Great. Thanks. Thanks, Thomas. Brianna, what do you think about these theme titles?
It seems like a good spread that pretty much covers, like, I agree with what's there.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. How about you, Ben?
So I think, one of the concerns I have with the first two on the left there is it's unclear whose outcomes or who's doing the actions, what kinds of actions, we're thinking about applying the data to. And so I think that needs to be an upfront part of the conversation, who we expect actually to be using the data and how we expect them to be using it.
Carolyn, do you want to speak to that for a moment?
I think that yes, it is top of mind for me as well, Ben. Yeah, I would say if you feel like, as you see the next slide is going to elaborate on what we're thinking that driving toward outcomes means, and if you feel like it's still not sufficiently incorporated, that is something we should talk about under that theme development or that recommendations development for that theme.
And does anyone else have some thoughts about these themes, thinking it should be something addition or something that would change? And if not, we'll go into the slides that dive a little deeper into what these themes are. Okay, let's go on to the next one. So we're talking about driving towards outcomes. The theme description here, developing a clear purpose, goals, implementation, strategy, and measures of success for future iterations of the Coastal Resilience Master Plan. So that's a general theme. Here are a few questions to consider. And these, again, are just questions to help us think a little bit further. So what should be the purpose of those future iterations of the plan? How can the Virginia Flood Protection Master Plan inform the Coastal Resilience Master Plan? What existing resources can be leveraged to establish goals should future iterations, for the future iterations of the plan? And then how can DCR obtain buy-in from key stakeholders on those updates to the plan's purpose and goals? Just some questions. You might have more questions. You can take them as they fit or leave them if they don't, but it gives an idea about driving towards outcomes. As an example recommendation, and you'll notice all the recommendations need to start with a verb because they're actions. So here's an example recommendation. If you like this one, you'll need to put it into the discussions coming up. It's just an example for now. So leverage the Virginia Flood Protection Master Plan vision and goals and metrics to develop a place-based coastal implementation strategy in the next Coastal Resilience Master Plan. Here's the concept around it. So any thoughts about, we're not coming up with the recommendations yet, that's going to be the next step, but any thoughts about driving toward outcomes? Does this work as a theme?
Yeah, this is Jack Rolakowski from the American Flood Coalition. My thought here, I think certainly I like the driving towards outcomes, right? the lens that I would offer maybe now and then to sort of apply when we're in the nuts and bolts subsequent sort of phase might be to make sure that we're kind of balancing process metrics with outcome metrics. I think sometimes in public policy, it's easy for us to sort of bean count process and we lose the actual outcome part of the outcomes. So just sort of being careful about number of projects, number of dollars, to make sure that we're just as diligent on kind of the accounting and accounting on the back end, having established goals associated with sort of actual, in this case, let's say flood risk reduction and sort of sub-metrics there and to be determined later. So that would just be my theme on just checking ourselves always on process metrics versus sort of outcome metrics.
And Jack, that can be a recommendation itself. So when you get into the room, the breakout rooms, that would be great to add. Marcus, do you have any thoughts on this one, driving toward outcomes?
Well, I think I think what's put together is it's clear, and it's clear that you're looking for, which I think is important. The last one there, where you're saying buy-in from key stakeholders. That to me seems very important. Getting key stakeholders to buy in, and we've got a sort of a common plan that everyone agrees to.
Great. And the Outreach and Communication Subcommittee yesterday had discussions around recommendations as well, and those definitely involve the key stakeholders in their discussions. All right, let's look at the next slide. The second theme, general topic, supplying actionable impact data. So thinking of this as a theme, effectively assessing the potential impacts of flooding to support decision making. And then questions to consider: what gaps exist in flood hazard impact assessment data? How can you help to fill these gaps? Or how anyone can? Can the plan support efforts to adapt to flooding and mitigate its impacts on private property as well as public? An example recommendation here, again, just an example, continue state interagency coordination efforts aimed at the development, maintenance, and enhancement of accessible region-wide asset data sets for non-sensitive data. So thinking about the topic, that's the question at hand. Is this good as a theme, supplying actionable impact data? Chris Berg, do you have a thought?
No substantive thoughts, really. I think, obviously, we all can agree that the data piece is pretty crucial here and something that we're focused on at VDOT and trying to coordinate with DCR and others where we can. So, yeah, just kind of echo the importance of this as a theme.
Great. I'll ask one more person before we go on. How about Eli?
I would kind of go back to Ben's comment on this. I think that having that impact data is important, especially at the regional level, but making sure that it's accessible and provided in a way that our localities can really implement is going to be very important.
Okay, great. Well, thank you.
Actually, Linda, if I could jump in, and
sure.
I'm actually going to take us back to the driving toward outcomes and continue on my focus on kind of temporal aspects. And so when developing a clear plan, purpose, and goals, and as well as measures of success especially, I think we should somehow, again, take into account temporal aspects so that we're clear that what is the time span over which we're looking at this particular project that we're evaluating, what's the time scale it's expected to help? Is it just short term? Is it medium term? Is it thinking very long term? And if it's short or mid term, what does that do for our options and our sunk costs and investments over the long term?
Great. Excellent. So let's go on. We'll go to the last one, the third theme, unless you have a new one. So identifying flood resilience needs. The description for this theme is about establishing criteria to define where the greatest need for flood resilience actions exists. So questions you could consider. How might we address areas identified in the plan as being at high flood risk with no planned resilience action? Should the plan identify areas of greatest need for flood resilience action in the coastal region? And if so, what kind of criteria might be used to do that? And how could those criteria be used to support flood resilience? There may be other questions too. The example recommendation here, again, starting with the verb, conduct an iterative analysis of resilience actions in the high flood risk areas, incorporating feedback from relevant stakeholders. So identifying flood resilience needs, good theme topic. And I'll also ask if there are any others or if those three will be good for your topic in general.
I'll bring up a thought on this one, and it may be for the breakout room discussion, but one thing I think we should be mindful of is maybe not making need synonymous with vulnerability. I think there's also some local, regional, and state decision-making that can drive the need, so from a DOT perspective, I think a lot of what we're seeing across the country, if there is a discussion about a locality's decision to, kind of address that vulnerability or maybe even consider managed retreat, that can drive other decision-making thereafter, again, at the regional and state level. So, if there's a need, doesn't necessarily mean we have to put resources to there. I think we need to understand sort of what the local and community desire is, and starting to get that built into this theme, I think would be beneficial from a multi-stakeholder perspective.
Great. Thank you. Ken, any thoughts about these themes? Are they good for you? See if you can unmute. Okay, we'll come back.
You may have stepped away.
We'll come back to you, Ken, just to make sure. And then, how about Scott?
Not a lot to say. Themes are fine with me. They seem to tie back to what we had discussed yesterday in the other subcommittee.
Okay, great. And just to make sure our mics are working as well, Whitney, do you have any thoughts?
Just when you were discussing this, especially the first point under questions, that doesn't fit in my mind very well with establishing criteria, but maybe, we look at this as capacity building is quite different from construction projects. But anyway, that's my only hesitancy.
Great point. So in terms of what you're thinking, Whitney, will it cover, if you've got different recommendations, can they be contained within driving toward outcomes, supplying actionable impact data, or identifying flood resilience needs? And Carolyn, you can switch to the next slide, which will show all four. Well, here's others if we need others, but here do these three work for everyone? Sounds like they do. Ian, how about your thoughts on this? See if Ian can unmute.
Oh,
there we go.
I slowly right when you said my name. Did not hear. Yeah, I guess going back to identifying flood resilience needs, I know in earlier, one of the earlier presentation slides for like opportunities was talking about social vulnerability index. I'd be curious to see if that could be factored in to those flood resilience needs and try to like connect not just where is it flooding, but like bigger public health, expanding those needs.
Good. Do you feel like that can fit under the needs theme?
Potentially, yeah.
Different type, but it can still fit. Okay, great. And let's see if Ken came back. Ken, can you unmute?
We've yet to step away.
He's still stepping. Okay, no problem. So here's the exciting part. We're going to dive in and be able to develop these recommendations. So a quick review of what Carolyn talked about. We want to begin each recommendation with a verb, make it actionable. These recommendations apply prior to the next planning phase, so for the next 1 to 4 years or so. You want to make sure that the recommendations could also include things like the planning process improvements, if you'd like. And we're asking to use general terms. In other words, you don't want to identify exactly which agency is supposed to do such and such. It's more about state agencies versus one particular one, like Department of Emergency Management. But don't worry too much about that part. Come up with your recommendations, and if wordsmithing needs to happen later, that's no problem whatsoever. Okay, so we're about to do our breakout room discussions. Let me explain how all this will work. So we have 3 breakout rooms set up, 1, 2, and 3, based on those 3 themes. You will have a facilitator in each of those breakout rooms from our launch consulting team. You will also have a representative from DCR in each of those breakout rooms, and there will be, because there's 13 of you members, there's 4, 4, and 5. So in terms of the number of members in each breakout room. That's just the first room, just to start off. After you get into the breakout rooms, what we ask you to do is to take a few minutes and brainstorm just on your own some recommendations that would work based on that particular topic that you're in. Once you make those brainstorming recommendations, we ask that you type them into chat. So hopefully everybody's chat's working. You can test all the members right now. Go ahead and bring up the chat window and just type anything you want. You can type hello, anything at all. Just want to make sure the chat function is working for all of you. The backup, of course, as you're coming up with ideas, if chat is not working or you don't want to use it in that way, feel free to say your recommendation out loud, and your facilitator will type the recommendation onto the screen. So we will have one big screen on there that all of those recommendations, even the ones going into chat, will eventually be captured on. So that's our general process, taking a couple minutes to come up with some of these on your own. Then feel free to dive in and have as much discussion as you would like among all the members around the recommendations and your ideas, and you'll come up with some wonderful things together. After about 10 minutes or so in a breakout room, then what you'll want to do is you'll want to exit that breakout room and choose a different one to go to. So let's say you're in breakout room number 2. When you choose next, choose breakout room 1 or breakout room 3. Everyone doesn't have to switch at the same time. You can if that works out that way. But the idea is that in the next half an hour, just till about 11:30, we want to give you a chance to think and look in each of those different topic areas. So you'll be visiting each of the 3 breakout rooms. what's really nice is that in the main room, you'll have a few of us. That's this room we're in right now. If you have trouble of any kind, anything technical, whatever, you just have to click the button that sends you back into the main room, and we'll help you go to the next one. So feel free to come back to the main room at any point, and then around 11:30, we'll close all those breakout rooms. We're going to ask you to come back to the main room on your own first. If not everybody makes it on their own, we'll actually do a closeout of the breakout rooms, and you'll be hyperspace joined back with us. At that point, around 11:30, we'll have a large group discussion on the highlights that came out of the breakout rooms, and then go into the rest of the meeting by 11:40. Again, for the public, anyone who is not a member, if you have ideas or things that you want to say, please jot those down and then go ahead and let us know when we call for that time at 11:40 for the public input. Anyone have any questions about anything? Okay, so I'm going to click a button that opens these breakout rooms. And for those of you who are members and a few others, you will see an invite. Click on it and you'll dive into that room. For members of the public and others who are here and left in this main room, you can tell us which room you would like to be sent into, and we'll send you there. You're welcome. You can actually choose on your own right now to go into a breakout room, and you could also move around between breakout rooms. So if you want to listen in on anything, members of the public, feel free to do so and enjoy those discussions from the members. How was that discussion? So members, feel free to unmute yourselves. As everyone comes back in, we can start a general discussion now. Probably it felt like time was too short.
Yeah, I think once everyone got going, yeah, you realize, you forget about the time and you just sort of, everyone's collaborating, which is great with what we want. So
there's so much to talk about.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about, particularly when you get into the breakout rooms. So when I sort of dropped through all of them, everyone was very much engaged, which is great.
And we'll do some discussion now, Marcus, when everyone comes back in. Then there's a public comment time. If there's time after that and we want to continue general discussion as a big group, we can do that too.
Oh, that'd be great. Yep.
Great. So welcome back in. Hope you enjoyed your hyperspace journey to different breakout rooms. And what we'd like to do now is just talk for a few minutes about anything big that came up. Or if I know time felt short for many of you, if there's something else that you want to add right now, feel free to add another recommendation into chat. We'll make sure we pick that up. But feel free to talk about kind of the big things that came up. So in room 2, supplying actionable impact data, what came up for you? Anything major that was a theme? Anything you want to mention? Anyone who came through room 2? And Morgan, if you have a moment, you can screen share your list that was there.
Sure thing, coming right up. All right. Thanks, data team. We got a lot of great recommendations on the list here, and that's what you're seeing on the screen share.
Great. Anyone have a thought or a quick thing to mention about actionable impact data, supplying actionable impact data? And if not, we're going to move to room 3, so identifying flood resilience needs. Rebecca, any highlights from your room there?
Oh, did you want me to share my screen, Linda? I can do that.
Sure.
Okay. Awesome. So we have a good list of recommendations right here. If anyone in this that wasn't joined this room, if they wanted to speak on anything, please feel free to unmute and do so.
Would you scroll up just a little, Rebecca, so we can see? Yeah, perfect. Thanks.
I can pick out one that we talked on. So we have 3C, include section and final report, discussing outliers and responses, disproportionately high or low, and plans to address in subsequent iterations. So looking at those outliers, whether they're disproportionately high projects that are reported or disproportionately low, to ensure we're addressing why that is and any gaps.
Great. And we'll go to room 1. Let's screen share. Cece can screen share from what we collected for driving toward outcomes. Once you get going in these discussions, it's a bit like drinking from a fire hose at some point when the ideas start to flow.
Yes, and we have more conversation, excuse me, and ideas here, and they aren't quite yet as refined into specific recommendations, but some really good conversation and important points on, again, back to the temporal aspects. We discussed those again, and some other items on, the cost of the projects and overall investment. So some great feedback to wordsmith into some good recommendations. If anyone from this group would like to speak on anything discussed, please feel free. I think we've captured most of it here.
Great. And so what we'll do, go ahead, does someone unmute? Okay. So what we're going to do, we're going to coalesce all of these different recommendations into a series of specific recommendations as draft recommendations and be able to send that out to you in a survey. When you get that survey, we're going to ask you to choose a certain number. You're just going to vote on the ones that you think are most important. So it will be somewhere, let's say we give you 10 votes. You can vote on 10 of them that you think are most important. Maybe it'll be fewer votes than that. And be able to submit that survey fairly quickly after we send it out. Then when we get back together in the next quarter, we'll continue on with the recommendation discussion and see where that goes. By the fourth quarter of the year, then you'll be able to truly vote on one's 3 to 5 recommendations that will come from the subcommittee. Well, thanks. I'm going to turn it back over to Carolyn.
Thanks, Linda. Okay, I see that Jeff is going to have some updates he'd like to give. This is our public comment period. If you have not already indicated that you would like to make public comment and you would like to do so, please go ahead and indicate so in the chat, and otherwise we can turn it over to Jeff. Go ahead, Jeff.
All right. Thanks, y'all. For folks who don't know me, I'm a coastal planner with the Virginia Coastal Zone Management Program, House of DEQ, and we were helping with the first phase 1 of the plan. So I've got some experience in the space, but we're not as active as we were due to the great work that DCR staff are doing. Just really quickly, put this on the radar, focus again sort of on the project side that the subcommittee is tackling. We have a FY23 project that started this past October to look at existing work in waterfronts, so infrastructure for watermen and other industry, to look at those sites and kind of doing a resilience assessment, so using everything from desktop review to boots on the ground and photos and looking at different things from flood risk, sea level rise, to just infrastructure and do they have Wi-Fi, in terms of emergency preparedness or cell phone service. So Middle Peninsula PDC is leading that, and there's going to be input from Northern Neck, Eastern Shore, and Hampton Roads as part of that. So we'll get about 20 sites, but that might be something to keep an eye on, and I'm happy to answer your questions if folks want to reach out. That should end in September, and what we've done is we've taken the criteria from the project database, the master plan database, and then added to it. But we basically, at the core of it, has the information, all those criteria and tabs, so that if the owner, if the applicant would like to go forward with the project being submitted to the database, it's already kind of queued up in that format. So you'll see potentially a wave of those coming in, again, depending on the PDCs and maybe potentially private property owners, which is something currently not really eligible, but or haven't seen a lot of, but just something to consider. And also with some of our bipartisan infrastructure law projects that we've gotten awarded. Folks may have read in the news some SAV restoration by VIMS in the Eastern Shore, and then Upper Mattaponi Indian Tribe got a land acquisition project that is not really, we can't say that, you know, right now in this phase it's land acquisition that they're doing habitat restoration for resilience, but they're leveraging that purchase. It's about 850 acres to then apply for NIFWIP grants or CFPF funds to do some resilience work and habitat restoration. So again, with the tribe's permission, you might see some of those types of projects come in the queue. And then finally, working with our coastal policy team, which is state agencies and PECs, we have competitive BIL funding. The Upper Mattaponi and VIMS ones were in 2023, but upcoming, if we have some that don't make kind of the cut that we have to submit to NOAA or don't get funded at that second level, we can work with those owners and applicants, again, mostly state agencies and PDCs, to submit those to CFPF for funding or just the database. So that's all for me. Just want to put that on folks' radar.
Thank you, Jeff. And I just want to add, we have been coordinating closely with the CZM team here at DCR to try to get the projects and initiatives that they have received and are funding and supporting into the Web Explorer. So I think we're still working on that process, but some of them are already in there and they will be included in the analysis in the plan. Are there any other comments? Okay. If not, Linda, I'm just going to turn it over to you to see if there's anything else that you want to do in terms of wrapping up the exercise that we've just gone through. And if not, I'll take over in terms of final discussion and action items.
So members, would you like to talk for about 10 more minutes here together about recommendations or about your thoughts? Do we want to continue in that flow? And if not, you can just give us, if you know how to do the thumbs up or some kind of a little icon in your screen. If you want to continue to do discussion, give some kind of mark in your screen or raise your hand or say yes in chat. And if not, we'll go ahead and wrap this part of the meeting up and do more discussion later. So, yeah, so it seems like the energy of discussion time has passed, but we'll pick it back up next time. So I'll turn it back over to you, Carolyn.
Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Just want to offer that opportunity. Is there any other, from the subcommittee members, are there any other topics that we have not discussed at this meeting? Any questions that you have that have come up that you want to ask separately from recommendations about the impact assessment or planned resilience actions or anything? Now's the time. Okay. All right. Well, then in terms of action items and scheduling, so we're going to take, as Linda has already shared, we're going to take what you all have done, kind of try to craft some comparably developed types of sentences around recommendations for you all to prioritize between meetings. So please do be on the lookout for that email and try your best to get back to us. Our next full TAC meeting will be on June 18th. It is an all virtual meeting, so please make sure you have that on your calendars. It'll be an opportunity to hear about some, brief updates about what the other subcommittees have been working on and their recommendations as well, to kind of get a picture across all of the subcommittees what's coming out. For our next meeting of this subcommittee, it's not yet scheduled. We're going to work on getting that scheduled, but we will continue giving you updates on the planned resilience actions analysis and impact assessment for this phase 2 plan. And then we will continue the discussion around recommendations development. And that is all I've got. I will turn it over to Marcus to wrap things up and adjourn us.
Okay. Thank you, Caroline. And once again, everyone, I really want to thank you guys for attending this meeting and really for the collaboration. I thought it was really great. Good to jump into the breakout sessions and see everyone brainstorm. So, and there's going to be a ton of feedback that comes from that. So thank you again. Thank you for the public remarks, and really appreciate you guys making time. I hope you have a great weekend. And with that, we will adjourn. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a great weekend.